The Lone Shogun: The Story of Tokugawa Iemitsu. Prologue: An unstable successor. In the early Edo period, the name of the Tokugawa family spread among the samurai as a symbol of great power. Among them, Tokugawa Iemitsu was particularly notable. He was born in Edo Castle in 1604. His grandfather, Tokugawa Ieyasu, was a great shogun who ended the warring states era and built an era of peace. And as a descendant of his, great expectations were placed on Iemitsu. However, Iemitsu's childhood was by no means smooth. The birth of Iemitsu. In 1604, the cry of a baby echoed through the great hall of Edo Castle, announcing the birth of Iemitsu. At that moment, his father, Tokugawa Hidetada, rejoiced at the birth of his son, but at the same time felt a heavy responsibility. Iemitsu was born with the destiny of becoming a future shogun. Hidetada vowed to himself that he must carry on Ieyasu's will, and raise Iemitsu to be a fine shogun. However, behind the voices of joy at Iemitsu's birth, there were complex human relationships within the family. Hidetada's wife, Go, accepted Iemitsu's birth as her own child, but felt jealous. She was worried that Iemitsu's becoming shogun would put the position of her other children in jeopardy. Conflicts in childhood. Iemitsu's childhood had a great influence on his growth. In particular, his relationship with his wet nurse, Kasuga no Tsubone, was a source of emotional support for Iemitsu. Kasuga no Tsubone was a woman who combined kindness and strictness, and was like a mother to Iemitsu. She taught Iemitsu knowledge and etiquette, and worked hard to develop his qualities as a shogun. On the other hand, Iemitsu sometimes suffered from conflicts with his father, Hidetada. Hidetada had high expectations of Iemitsu, but also gave him strict guidance to protect his position. Iemitsu struggled to establish his own existence while trying to meet his father's expectations. He was sometimes irritated that his will was not respected, and he was hidden in his father's shadow. Kasuga no Tsubone was an emotional support for Iemitsu, guiding him so that he did not lose sight of himself. She taught Iemitsu the importance of valuing his own opinions and feelings, and helped him acquire the qualities to be a future shogun. The presence of Kasuga no Tsubone. His relationship with Kasuga no Tsubone was indispensable in Iemitsu's life. As she watched Iemitsu grow up, she looked forward to seeing what kind of shogun he would become in the future. Kasuga no Tsubone taught Iemitsu the history of the warring states period, and Ieyasu's teachings, and played a role in giving him confidence. However, Kasuga no Tsubone's presence was not just a support for Iemitsu's growth. She sometimes scolded him with harsh words, and sometimes stimulated him to grow stronger. Iemitsu struggled to prove his strength amid Kasuga no Tsubone's love and strictness. Iemitsu's determination. As he grew up, Iemitsu began to seriously consider his own destiny. He sought out what he should accomplish as a shogun, and resolved to become someone who would exceed Ieyasu's expectations. In his heart, he had a strong desire to protect the peaceful era that Ieyasu had built, and to aim for further development. Iemitsu began to feel that he needed to reconsider his relationship with his father, Hidetada, in order to show his will. He resolved to work hard not only to be recognized by his father, but also to establish his own value. Kasuga no Tsubone also understood Iemitsu's decision, and did her best to support him. The path to the future. After the conflicts of his childhood, Iemitsu gradually found his own path. He continued to challenge himself to prove his strength, while carrying Ieyasu's expectations. His deep bond with Kasuga no Tsubone became his emotional support, and Iemitsu moved forward toward the future with her teachings in mind. Thus began Iemitsu's story. His future was still unclear, but he maintained a firm belief, and continued to walk forward to prove his strength. This story is just one chapter that depicts his growth as a shogun, and exceeding Ieyasu's expectations. Tokugawa Iemitsu's birth and childhood were important foundations for his growth. The impact of his relationship with Kasuga no Tsubone, his conflicts with his father, and Ieyasu's expectations on him is immeasurable. Iemitsu developed the qualities of a shogun through his struggle to meet the expectations of others, while still having his own will. His story has only just begun. Chapter 2: A difficult childhood and the struggle for succession. Iemitsu was born in Edo in 1596 as the eldest son of Tokugawa Hidetada and Ogu no Kata. From an early age, he was expected to be the next shogun. But he was often treated coldly by Hidetada and his mother. In particular, Iemitsu was physically weak and sickly as a child. So his mother's love was directed toward his second son, Tadanaga. This planted a deep sense of loneliness and anxiety in Iemitsu's heart. Furthermore, Iemitsu's speech impediment and introverted personality intensified his father Hidetada's anxiety. Hidetada's doubts about whether Iemitsu was suitable to lead the Tokugawa family in the future were expressed in his strict guidance and cold attitude toward Iemitsu. In contrast, his younger brother, Tadanaga, was an active and intelligent boy, and was seen by everyone in the family as a promising candidate for the future. What was most painful for Iemitsu was that his mother, Ogu, clearly favored Tadanaga. She treated Iemitsu coldly, and all her love was devoted to Tadanaga. This cold treatment in the family planted a deep inferiority complex in Iemitsu's heart, and he began to lose sight of his own worth. The outbreak of a succession struggle. As time passed, Iemitsu gradually solidified his position as the successor to the shogun. But a fierce succession struggle erupted between him and his younger brother Tadanaga. In particular, his mother Ogu had a strong desire to place Tadanaga as shogun, and some voices within the shogunate were raising Tadanaga. During this period, Iemitsu felt deep anxiety and impatience. As the successor to the shogun, Iemitsu was also closely watched by his father Hidetada. Hidetada had doubts about whether Iemitsu was truly worthy of the position, and paid even more attention to his upbringing. On the other hand, Iemitsu himself was not confident in his own qualities. The important role played during this period was played by Kasuga no Tsuboni. Kasuga no Tsuboni was Iemitsu's wet nurse for many years, and she always stood by his side and encouraged him when he was plagued by loneliness and anxiety. Her strong will and loyalty were a great source of emotional support for Iemitsu. Kasuga no Tsuboni's strategies. In order to make Iemitsu the next shogun, Kasuga no Tsuboni took various measures. First, she directly approached Hidetada regarding the shogun's succession dispute, persuading him to believe in Iemitsu's suitability as shogun. She also worked closely with the powerful feudal lords within the shogunate, strengthening the forces supporting Iemitsu. The most decisive action Kasuga no Tsuboni took was to personally visit Tokugawa Ieyasu in Sumpu in 1620. Although Ieyasu was already in retirement, he still had a great influence within the shogunate, and played an important role in deciding the next shogun. Kasuga no Tsuboni appealed to Ieyasu about Iemitsu's suitability as shogun, and succeeded in obtaining his support. Thanks to Kasuga no Tsuboni's efforts, Iemitsu gradually established his position as the shogun's successor. However, the feud with Tadanaga continued, and Ogu in particular strongly supported Tadanaga, which led to rising tensions within the family. In 1623, Iemitsu was finally officially appointed as the third shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate. Iemitsu's appointment was achieved through the strategy of Kasuga no Tsuboni, the backing of Ieyasu, and Hidetada's final decision. However, during this period, Iemitsu's heart was swirling with complicated emotions. His relationship with his younger brother Tadanaga continued to deteriorate, and Tadanaga gradually became desperate. In particular, it is said that his mother Ogu's excessive defense of Tadanaga changed his personality to become even more violent and self-centered. Tadanaga repeatedly engaged in problematic behavior, eventually incurring the wrath of his father Hidetada. Finally, Tadanaga was stripped of his title in 1624 and imprisoned in Kofu. Unable to bear the confinement, he was forced to commit suicide in 1629. Tadanaga's death was a big shock to Iemitsu, but at the same time, it was an event that solidified his position as shogun. Awakening as shogun, Iemitsu gained the position of shogun, but many difficulties awaited him. Although he was an introvert, he gradually demonstrated his talent and strengthened the authority of the shogunate. In particular, Iemitsu promoted strong policies to establish the shogun's absolute power, and tried to strengthen the shogunate and system. Chapter 3: Establishment as Shogun and Political Reform. With the beginning of the Edo period, Tokugawa Ieyasu established his position as the ruler of Japan. After his death, Tokugawa Iemitsu, the son of Tokugawa Hidetada, succeeded him and worked to further strengthen the Edo shogunate as the third shogun. Iemitsu's reign solidified the foundation of the Edo shogunate through political reforms, the concentration of power, and changes in relations with his vassals. This story depicts Iemitsu's political skills, his complex relationships with his vassals, and the newly introduced systems. 1. The emergence of Iemitsu, and his establishment as shogun. Iemitsu was born in 1604. Iemitsu became shogun as the successor to his father, Hidetada, but the road was not always smooth. He faced many difficulties in taking power for the first time. In the early days of his reign, Iemitsu had to rebuild the balance of power with his vassals. He strengthened his power base by gathering reliable vassals and building trust. Iemitsu placed importance on cooperation with other daimyo. To maintain his power, he organized a powerful samurai group, and took measures to increase the prestige of the shogunate. His political skills quickly resulted in increasing the authority of the Edo shogunate. 2. Introduction of the Sankin Kotai system. In 1635, Iemitsu introduced the Sankin Kotai system. This system required each daimyo to travel back and forth between Edo and his own territory for a certain period of time. The introduction of this system was part of Iemitsu's political reforms, and was an important means of strengthening the power of the Edo shogunate. The Sankin Kotai system allowed the daimyo to strengthen their ties with the shogunate by staying in Edo. Iemitsu used this system to increase the financial burden on the daimyo, thereby increasing their dependence on the shogunate. He aimed to monitor the daimyo every time they came to Edo and limit their power. The Sankin Kotai system was a good example of how politically clever Iemitsu was. He established his own power by constantly keeping track of the movements of each daimyo, and nipping any rebellions in the bud. 3. Revision of the Byukusho Hatto. Iemitsu also revised the Byukusho Hatto. These laws stipulated the behavior and obligations of the samurai class, and were an important means of strengthening the shogunate's control. He further enhanced the shogunate's authority by demanding strict discipline for the samurai. The newly enacted Byukusho Hatto reflected Iemitsu's intentions and required the samurai to swear loyalty to the shogunate. This allowed Iemitsu to further strengthen his relationship with his vassals, and strengthen his own administration. 4. Conflict and cooperation with vassals. During Iemitsu's reign, his relationship with his vassals was by no means simple. In order to establish his own power, he was sometimes unable to avoid conflicts with his vassals. In particular, friction sometimes arose between him and his close aides over the distribution of power. Iemitsu skillfully overcame conflicts with his vassals, and succeeded in building cooperation with them. He was able to smoothly govern the shogunate by compromising when necessary, and respecting the opinions of his vassals. 5. Iemitsu's political skills and evaluation. During his reign, Iemitsu implemented numerous political reforms, and strengthened the foundations of the Edo shogunate. His skills were supported by his sensitivity to domestic and international situations, and his ability to respond flexibly to the circumstances. He was aware of his role as shogun, and understood the importance of holding power in his hands. Iemitsu's reign had a major impact on the history of Japan afterward. His policies brought stability and prosperity to the Edo shogunate, and succeeded in increasing the authority of the shogunate. Iemitsu established his position as shogun and made an effort to strengthen the shogunate, which resulted in his name being remembered for posterity. Tokugawa Iemitsu. He established his position as shogun, and implemented numerous reforms to strengthen the power of the Edo shogunate. The introduction of the alternate attendance system, and the revision of the Byukusho Hatto were important policies during his reign, and were a means to increase the shogunate's control. Iemitsu's political skills and complex relationships with his vassals are essential elements in discussing his reign. Iemitsu's era laid the foundation for the stability and prosperity of the Edo shogunate. His political reforms influenced future daimyo, and shaped the political framework of the Edo period. Iemitsu's name will forever be etched in history for his political skills and reforms. Chapter 4: National Isolation Policy and Exclusion of Foreign Powers. The reign of Tokugawa Iemitsu was a turbulent period in Japanese history, as the national isolation policy was strengthened. and the exclusion of foreign powers progressed, Iemitsu faced various challenges. In particular, the ban on Christianity was at the heart of his politics, and was an important measure to resist domestic and international pressure. Iemitsu was strongly aware of his responsibility to succeed his father Hidetada. From an early age, the question in his mind was always what was needed to protect the country. In particular, the influence from Europe could not be ignored, and the increase in Christians and foreign interference was seen as a threat to the stability of Japan. External pressure and domestic unrest. While Iemitsu was in power, the Shimabara rebellion broke out. This rebellion was led by Christians and sought freedom of religion. The rebel army involved farmers and townspeople, and grew to a size beyond imagination. Iemitsu resolved to take strict measures to suppress it. This rebellion is influenced by foreign powers, so we must not allow it to continue. It is a terrible thing. We cannot ignore it, Iemitsu told his subordinates. He believed that it was necessary to protect Japan's independence and stability by suppressing the rebellion. Decision to suppress the rebellion. It was not easy to suppress the Shimabara rebellion. The leaders of the rebellion were skilled in strategy, and Iemitsu's army had a hard time. However, Iemitsu did not give up. He stood at the front line of the battle himself, and by inspiring morale, he was able to unite the army. The battle with the rebels became extremely fierce, and Iemitsu gradually became distressed by the results. He spent many nights brooding over the sight of so many innocent people being sacrificed in the battle. However, he encouraged himself by thinking that it was necessary to suppress the rebellion for the stability of the nation. Building relations with foreign countries. After the Shimabara rebellion was suppressed, Iemitsu decided to further strengthen his isolationist policy. He felt that Japan must be prevented from being influenced by foreign countries as much as possible. Trade with the Netherlands was a wicked country, and limited, and contact with other countries should be kept to a minimum. It is important for our country to avoid unnecessary contact with other countries and stabilize domestic affairs, Iemitsu stated his will. He had a strong determination to protect his country. Therefore, Iemitsu believed that it was most important to not succumb to external pressure and to cherish our own country's culture and values. Effects and impacts of the isolation policy. As the isolation policy progressed, stability was restored within Japan and commerce developed. People were able to build their own culture and lives without foreign influence. However, on the other hand, there were also persecutions of Christians and suppression of voices calling for freedom. Iemitsu gradually came to face the consequences of his own policies. He was always thinking about what was best to protect his country. But at the same time, he spent his days asking himself whether it was really right to sacrifice people's lives and faith. The foundations for a new era. Iemitsu's reign was certainly he brought stability to the country. However, behind this was a lot of suffering, and he himself was also conflicted. Iemitsu felt the effects of the isolation policy, but he was also sensitive to the social changes that it brought about. Iemitsu came to think that the future of our country must be entrusted to the next generation. He wanted his rule to last, but at the same time, he recognized that it was important to lay the groundwork for the future. Iemitsu's legacy. The main themes of Tokugawa Iemitsu's era were the isolation policy and the ban on Christianity. But his rule was not simply an era of oppression. Iemitsu stuck to his beliefs. But he also had thoughts about the future of Japan. Through his rule, Japan would enter a new era. The culture and commerce that had been cultivated during the isolation policy, as well as the stability of the country, would be passed on to the next generation. Iemitsu's decision was important in determining the future direction of Japan, and his presence will continue to shine brightly in history. Chapter 5 Instructions for the Family and the Next Generation. At the end of the Kane era, Tokugawa Iemitsu was suffering from old age and illness. His reign as the third shogun of the Edo shogunate brought peace and prosperity. But behind it all was a great deal of responsibility and loneliness. Iemitsu felt invisible shackles beneath his feet as he read his diary, which recorded the events and policies of his day. In his quiet study, he was afflicted by illness and had lost his former vitality. He could no longer go out and watch over the people as he had done in his youth. However, even in his loneliness, Iemitsu had one hope in his heart. That was his expectation for his successor, Ieyasu. Education for Ieyasu. Iemitsu had raised Ieyasu with love. From an early age, he had rigorously taught him academics and martial arts, so that he could walk the path of a samurai. Based on his own experience, Iemitsu considered what was necessary for the next generation of shogun. Ieyasu, a shogun is not just someone who wields power. He must be someone who loves the people and leads them with wisdom, Iemitsu said. Ieyasu took those words to heart and drew his own ideal image of a shogun. However, as Iemitsu's health deteriorated, he felt the urgency of having to teach Ieyasu more. Every day, Iemitsu continued to tell Ieyasu how to fulfill his responsibilities as a shogun. How you are not alone. There is a family and people who support the shogunate. It is the shogun's duty to protect them, Iemitsu told him. Ties with family. Iemitsu's condition gradually worsened, and he increasingly shut himself up in his study. However, it was his family that supported him. His wife Chiyo and other family members watched over him by his side and tried to support him. Chiyo decorated the room with Iemitsu's favorite flowers and created a peaceful time. Iemitsu cherished time with his family and enjoyed conversations with them. His expectations for the next generation and his love for his family were deeply rooted in his heart. However, at the same time, Iemitsu was tormented by a sense of loneliness. His desire not to let his family see him suffering from his illness further confined him. Fighting loneliness. Iemitsu continued to think about Ietsuna's future while fighting the pain every day. Even though he felt his own limitations, he seriously considered what he should tell Ietsuna and what he should leave behind. One day, he decided to call Ietsuna and tell him his feelings. Ietsuna, many trials await you, but you must be strong-minded and listen to the voices of the people, he said, smiling. At that moment, a warm feeling spread in Ietsuna's heart. Even though he felt lonely, he felt a strong connection with Ietsuna. The hope of being able to watch Ietsuna grow up became his emotional support. Transmission of the teachings. In his later years, Iemitsu gradually became aware of his own death. But he was not afraid. Rather, his desire to watch Ietsuna grow into a fine shogun drove him forward. He decided to give Ietsuna his final teachings. I want you to never forget my teachings. Fulfill your responsibilities as a shogun, love the people, and above all, cherish your family. The future is in your hands, Iemitsu said forcefully. Ietsuna took those words to heart and shed tears. Iemitsu's words took root in his heart and became a source of emotional support for Iemitsu himself. Iemitsu fulfilled his role and entrusted his hopes to the next generation. Eternal farewell. Time passed, and Iemitsu's time finally came. He quietly closed his eyes and expressed his gratitude to his family and Ietsuna in his heart. Even after he left this world, Ietsuna vowed to continue on the path of shogun, keeping his teachings in his heart. Iemitsu's teachings were passed down to the next generation, and his thoughts lived on forever. Iemitsu left this world, but his heart was with his family, and he became the driving force behind the next generation of shoguns. Final chapter: The Legacy of Tokugawa Iemitsu. Tokugawa Iemitsu took over the position of shogun from his father, Tokugawa Hidetada, and further consolidated the foundation of the shogunate's rule. One of the most notable achievements of his reign was the establishment of a centralized system. Iemitsu formally institutionalized the Sankin Kotai system to suppress the power of the daimyo and strengthen the shogunate's control. This forced the daimyo to travel regularly between Edo and their own territories, imposing a heavy economic and psychological burden on them. This system also made it easier to monitor the daimyo, who gathered in Edo, allowing the shogunate to control politics throughout the country more effectively. Iemitsu also came up with unique policies in relations with foreign countries, in order to promote a policy of national isolation, and to protect Japan from outside influences. He banned trade with all countries except the Netherlands and China. This policy was intended to prevent foreign religions and cultures from influencing Japan, and to protect Japan's unique culture and political system. National isolation lasted for about 200 years, and became an important factor, supporting peace and stability during the Edo period. The death of Iemitsu and its impact on the Edo shogunate. In 1651, Tokugawa Iemitsu passed away at the young age of 48. His death marked a major turning point for the Edo shogunate. But the institutions and political system established during his reign continued to contribute to the stability of the shogunate. After Iemitsu's death, his son, Tokugawa Iemitsu, took over the shogunate as the fourth shogun, but since Iemitsu was only 11 years old, the Taira and Ryu actually managed the government affairs. The political system established by Iemitsu functioned effectively during Ietsuna's time. Institutions such as Sankin Kotai and the policy of national isolation continued to support the shogunate's rule and provided a stable foundation for Iemitsu's successors. The shogunate's control, which had been strengthened during Iemitsu's reign, did not waver, even after his death, and became the foundation for the continued peace of the Edo period. However, some problems arose after Iemitsu's death. The daimyo, who were accustomed to his strict style of governance, took advantage of Ietsuna's youth and inexperience, and gradually began to challenge the authority of the shogunate. In particular, the Kiin incident 1651 that occurred after Iemitsu's death is known as an incident in which some rebellion against the power of the shogunate surfaced. Although the rebellion was quickly suppressed, there is no doubt that Iemitsu's death was a test for the shogunate. Iemitsu's historical evaluation and legacy. Tokugawa Iemitsu is regarded as a strong leader in Japanese history, but he has also been criticized for his strict policies and ruthless decisions. He sometimes took ruthless measures to establish rule over the entire country, increasing pressure on the daimyo. In particular, he sometimes imposed merciless punishment on those who rebelled against the authority of the shogunate. His ruthlessness can be said to be a sign of his strength as a ruler, but some historians have questioned his methods of governance. Nevertheless, Iemitsu's legacy was very large, and many historians agree that his political system supported the peace and prosperity of the Edo period. Iemitsu's reign established a solid foundation for the Edo shogunate, which was able to rule Japan for about 250 years. His policies were an example for subsequent shoguns, and systems such as alternate attendance and the policy of national isolation became pillars for maintaining peace and stability in the Edo period. In addition, the cultural policies promoted by Iemitsu are also recognized as part of his legacy. Iemitsu took measures to protect traditional Japanese culture, such as no tea ceremony and flower arrangement, and to prosper the city of Edo. During his reign, Edo developed rapidly, ushering in a glorious era that would later be called Jinroku culture. The cultural foundations Iemitsu fostered became an important factor in shaping Japanese aesthetics and art throughout the Edo period. The legacy of Tokugawa Iemitsu. After his death, the legacy he left behind took deep root in Japanese society during the Edo period. The political system he established became the foundation that supported the stability and long-term rule of the Edo shogunate, and Iemitsu's name was passed down to posterity as the great shogun who built the stability of the shogunate. His policies and methods of governance, while criticized by some, created an important turning point in Japanese history, and were one of the factors that realized the peace and prosperity of the Edo period. Even after his death, Iemitsu's influence continued. His alternate attendance system maintained the shogunate's control, and his isolationist policy protected Japan's uniqueness. Furthermore, the culture he protected shaped the rich traditions that colored the Edo period, and had a great influence on later generations. The peace he brought to the country is remembered in history as the era of peace, and Iemitsu's name is passed down as its symbol. Ultimately, Tokugawa Iemitsu's legacy is not only that he strengthened the foundations of the Edo shogunate, but also that he had a great impact on Japanese culture and society. Even after his death, the institutions and culture he established continued to function throughout the Edo period, and his legacy continues to influence modern Japan. To sum up Iemitsu's reign, he was a great leader who supported the stability and prosperity of Japan, and his legacy lives on to this day. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like our channel.